What if Naruto was Goku's reincarnation part 2? Let's go. So, the next few months of the academy continue. At this point, his taijutsu is far above anyone else's in his class, even Rock Lee, who looks up to Naruto as a friend but also a rival, as he's taken his training very seriously and thought of having a rival as it would improve his power the fastest and the best. And Naruto, being better than Rock Lee, would be the perfect match. And they do have similar interests too, and similar training, so it would fit perfectly. Naruto didn't really care, but Rock Lee seemed to care a lot. But at this point, they were actually doing some chakra training in the academy, which was a big problem for only two people in the class, this being both Naruto and Rock Lee. Now, of course, Rock Lee has been known to have absolutely no chakra that he's able to muster, similar to the legend Might Guy, who mastered the art of taijutsu, and therefore Rock Lee wants to be similar to him, as they both are basically unable to use any sort of ninjutsu or anything that requires chakra, so they have taijutsu on their side. But Naruto is different. Naruto does have some form of chakra, but it is different. For example, Neji once used his Byakugan in class just to look at how strong people are, as he could somewhat judge it and look at how much chakra they have by looking at how much is flowing through their body at the moment. Sasuke's is pretty high, and there was actually some in his eyes, which was interesting. But Naruto's was different. It wasn't like the other people's chakra. It didn't even have certain points where it was the strongest. It was almost equal throughout the whole body, which is weird. And of course it did have the Nine Tails with it too, which made it scary. But once again, there was something weird about his chakra, and it wasn't even normal chakra. So Neji didn't even think of it as chakra. It was so different, so weird. So when they started doing some actual practical chakra training to start doing clone jutsus, as it would be required later on, and they just wanted to see who could already do it, Sasuke was the first one able to do it, and then Neji could only a few weeks later, and they were still both prodigies, which is really fast to learn a jutsu that fast and at such a young age. But Naruto, when trying it, seemed to not get it at all. Rock Lee's form was perfect, yet he completely failed. But Naruto had a feeling in his limbs, especially the palm of his hands, which started sweating and started grasping the air out of instinct, and then somehow his hand moved upwards and his whole arm moved upwards to a 90-degree angle. His fist opened into an open palm, and then some weird light flew out of it into a tree nearby and broke the tree. This they would later call Ki, an advanced form of chakra, something different that they would have to study, as it was never documented before and never even seen or heard of. No one knew what it was, but they couldn't let Naruto pass. He didn't do any of the jutsus, yet there was a different power slumbering inside of him. So maybe if he was able to control that and become strong with that, perhaps they would see if they let him pass. But for now, the academy would continue until they're much older. Precisely speaking, the age of 12. So after 4 years, the whole class took the genin tests. One task was simply throwing shuriken or kunai, whichever you preferred, at a piece of log with a target on it, and if you got at least 5 out of the 10 kunais to get in a certain radius of the middle, marked as a white dot, they would pass. There was a point system, though that didn't really matter, as they would only allow people to pass if for some reason they hit bullseyes, but only 4 of them and the rest missed. But that basically never happened, but it was there in case. But again, almost never happened. It was now Naruto's turn, and he was actually okay with shuriken. He picked the shuriken as he felt like kunais were a little bit harder to control in the air, but shuriken he could just twist in any way possible, and as long as he was accurate, they would land. So he just put a little bit of power into it, spun it, and boom, it landed. But when it did, it carved a line into the piece of wood, into the target, starting to crack it. And after the 10th shuriken, the log snapped in half. By the way, all of the shuriken hit on the log. Not all of them super accurate, but they all hit the log. 7 of them within that certain radius that they would have to pass. So he did pass, but the target broke. Naruto passed though, so they got a new target and the exams continued as normal. Now this exam was a sparring match with another person. They chose one of the teachers, this being Mizuki, as a new way to do the genin exams. They wanted to see how well the students could actually handle themselves in a sparring match, and technically, to an extent, an actual fight, as they could use any type of ninjutsu, kekkei, or anything else, as long as of course they didn't harm their opponent. Mizuki was told to hold back somewhat at least, to not hurt any of the students. All you had to do was last in the fight for 1 minute, standing on your feet, that is. Then it was Naruto's turn. Naruto went into stance about 5 meters away from Mizuki. That's about 16 feet, by the way, if you're American. And then the fight began. Mizuki immediately started dashing towards Naruto, but he was prepared, as fighting and only taijutsu was his speciality. So at the beginning, he was actually overpowering Mizuki. He was simply faster and had more fighting experience. For some reason, he had almost like a fighting sense that made him be able to predict what the opponent would do next, almost as if he's had many battles. This was Goku in him, who's had many battles throughout his life, and was able to give some of his experiences and memories to Naruto. Though, by the way, Naruto does, again, not have any of Goku's actual memories, and can't talk to him either. For now. Not even Kurama knows of Goku, so. Anyways, their fight continued as now Mizuki started using some ninjutsu, substitution jutsu, and clone jutsu to trick Naruto. It somewhat worked, but he was still somewhat winning the fight, which is why Mizuki was actually getting angry. He would never allow a demon, a monster, a tailed beast to pass this exam and become an official shinobi. He would only bring shame and unluck to the village. So Mizuki felt like it was his responsibility to stop this immediately, as he now used most of his power available to him without actually making it seem like he's using a lot of his power, as he would probably get fired and be in big trouble if he was caught using more power than he should have against a student in a sparring match in the genin exam. Anyways, now Mizuki was winning, and Naruto was being pushed into a corner, but at this point it was too late, and 1 minute had been over. Iruka called the match, and both Naruto and Mizuki immediately stopped the fight, and therefore Naruto passed. Although the more experienced fighters and Shunin who were watching the match knew exactly that Mizuki was using much more force against Naruto than against the other students previously. Then the final test, each student would have to make a clone, and it doesn't really matter what clone, it could be any single one, but they would have to do it pretty much perfectly, which isn't too much to ask. I mean, after 4 years of practice and training, they should have definitely known how to do a clone jutsu. But then of course there were the ones like Rock Lee and Naruto who were simply unable to. However, since they were both special cases, they let them pass either way. However, there was gonna be a substitution for the test. They weren't just gonna let them be. Rock Lee had to do another sparring match, this one only using taijutsu, so it would be an even fight with his opponent. Meanwhile, Naruto would have to do something else. He had been practicing a lot with what he called ki blasts, which was shooting his light, his energy, out of his palms and using its destructive power as a weapon. And he would have to display that, but the way he did was left to his own. The only judges were the Hokage and 2 other teachers, one of them being Iruka. So, Naruto turned around 90 degrees, shot one blast out, calmly, without much hustle, and when it landed, there was an explosion, and multiple trees broke and were annihilated. However, luckily there was no fire damage, but even the ground itself, that didn't even touch the ki blast, tore up and was hurt during the explosion. This was more than enough and satisfying for Naruto to pass this exam, and therefore, everybody, including Rock Lee and Naruto, became genin. However, there was one person that did not become a genin, and that was Kiba. However, Mizuki actually personally talked to him afterwards and offered him another way to become a genin. This was to get the scroll of sealing and bring it to Mizuki. It was supposedly a secret way of becoming a genin and getting honor and fame throughout the Leaf Village. Of course, Kiba, being desperate as he is, fell for it and stole the scroll that night, brought it into the forest, and started flipping through it, but he didn't really understand much. Naruto was spying on him and looked through it as well, as he had pretty sharp eyes. He saw some pretty cool things until he saw something called the Flying Thunder God technique, almost like a teleportation technique. Interesting. I mean, he didn't have any chakra, so it'd probably be very hard to do that, but if he could teleport, that'd be incredible for his taijutsu. There was gonna be so many new ways of fighting that he could use if he was able to teleport, so that would be really good to practice. He just didn't know how. He would likely have to make a new strategy or technique. Anyways, now Mizuki came and wanted to take the scroll, but actually Iruka arrived, and then they started fighting as their argument started heating up, and Mizuki was said to have been a traitor to the Leaf Village and wanted to bring the scroll to some bad guy, though he didn't reveal who. Naruto quickly ran around the lighting in the forest until he was at the back of Mizuki and pinned him to the ground. This was only right after he threw shuriken at Kiba, which Iruka had to dodge. Well, not dodge, but block for Kiba, resulting in a pretty bad back injury. However, Naruto pinned Mizuki down and brought him to the 3rd Hokage personally. Then afterwards came back to Iruka and helped him get to the hospital. They'd never been that close, though Iruka didn't mind Naruto that much as he saw some of his own childness in Naruto, and now he was very thankful to him, as he would have had a big problem if he was left out to bleed in the forest. The situation was therefore saved by Naruto, and Kiba, well, he had to go back to the academy as he did not pass, even the quote-unquote secret test. Now the next day, it was told that Mizuki was a traitor, but the Konoha 12 who just became genin would still get their senseis, and Konoha would get their new group of genin and jonin team leaders. Naruto went into the classroom a tiny bit late as he slept in due to the stressful day that was yesterday. However, he didn't miss much as the teacher that taught him was very, very late. The last one, so late even, that Sasuke started sleeping. Sakura started staring at Sasuke, and Naruto meditated, trying to get his head clear before now starting a new chapter of his life as an actual genin. Then, finally, Kakashi Hatake, who would be their Jonin sensei, came into the room and greeted them. They were supposed to go to the roof, and then they did. Naruto immediately stood up, slowly walked towards the door, but before going through the door, he seemed to vanish out of Sakura and Sasuke's point of view, as now he was on the roof. He didn't transport or teleport, but he was just very, very fast. Sakura and Sasuke slowly followed. Not that slow actually, but Sakura was last. but they weren't really motivated, so they didn't care about how fast they were, as their journey teacher did now have them wait for over an hour. So if you waited a few seconds, they didn't think it'd be that bad. Anyways, now they start introducing each other, as they didn't really know each other, except for of course the three genin, who had been around each other for 4 years, especially Naruto and Sasuke. Well, mostly Naruto, who had kept Sasuke in his eye for quite a while, but Sasuke didn't acknowledge Naruto's strength, as he seemed to be a very powerful taijutsu fighter and could even become a sort of rival in the future. Then, their new joining leader told them about another test that they would have to go through, called the Bell Test, but didn't tell them more than that. He told them to also not eat, and the next day, they would do the Bell Test. Anyways, that's when we'll leave off the video. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.